What's going on, everyone? This is Noah from Spanky the Sparky. Today we have a very special guest, Mr. John McLaughlin, out of IBEW Local 24. He holds wears multiple hats in the local, both as a president of the local and then a referral agent. John, how's it going?
Good. How are you, Noah?
I'm doing good as well. I can't complain. Like I was saying prior to the start, thank you for taking the time to do the episode. I think it's important, I guess, as rank and file members that we obviously talk to each other out in the field, and sometimes I feel like there's a disconnect between the members and the leadership, so anytime I can get leadership on board to do one of these, I greatly appreciate it, and I know many others feel the same way, so thank you for taking the time to do the episode.
Absolutely, I'm happy to be here.
Yeah. So you have a little bit of an interesting background, in my opinion. I'll let you give a little intro about yourself, but I think it's very unique coming from the Ironworker side of work into the electrical field. That's something I've never heard of. I'm sure it happens more than I know, but if you want to give a little summary of your life to this point.
Sure. So, like you said, I'm the current president of Local 24 here in Baltimore. I'll be 39 years old this year. Did not start into the electrical trade right out of high school. Right out of high school, I took a position with a garage door company, to say the least. And I had an uncle who was a 25-year member of Local 16 in Baltimore, the Ironworkers local. And at 19 years old, my now wife ended up pregnant. And he said, "Hey, son, it's time you get something with some benefits and you get yourself a good career path." So I had some welding experience, from trade school, from working on the garage doors and stuff like that. So went over to the apprenticeship. It was over in Dundalk, kind of near the steel mill in Sparrows Point. Went over, got signed up, got on a job. I worked at Sparrows Point for a couple years. This rolled right in around 2008 to 2010. If anybody remembers that time, construction was extremely slow at that point.
Yes.
So I was laid off, out of work for some time. Was working odds and ends things here and there for a few years, working in some residential properties, doing home improvements and stuff like that. Ran into a buddy of mine who I had asked to do some electrical work for me, and he said, "Hey man, why don't you check out the IBEW?" And at that time I was 24, 25, and I just kind of didn't really want to start over. I remember what apprenticeship was about, and being that young guy having to chase, buckets of steam or whatever, something that was made up on a job site. And I just thought, at 25 now, 24, with two young kids at home, I just didn't want to be that guy. But I go home talking to my wife and saying "Hey, I think, it's time. I get into a career like this is, it's paying okay weekly, but I have no benefits. I got no health. I got no pension, no annuity, and no representation really." So I talked to her about it, and I went down and applied. Came down here to the apprenticeship. I applied. Ironically, when I got I went through the aptitude test first, got my interview date. The day was scheduled for my interview, we were on vacation, and I drove back about 3.5 hours away for the interview. Made it home, changed my clothes, and almost didn't make it to the interview because I thought, I'll just take a nap. But I got up, I went to the interview. I was selected for the apprenticeship, started that September, and then here we are, 14 years later. So
That's
it's definitely been an interesting start, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's definitely a lot different than I'm used to hearing, myself included. You were just mentioning how you you were an iron worker and then you progressed. Sounds like you're kind of on the fence about what you're going to do because of basically the recession in that time frame that was going on, and then you got into the electrical field. What did that transition teach you about how the trades see each other?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I remember being on a job site as an iron worker and seeing the electricians getting set up for a big wire pool. It was very coordinated. They had the real wire there. They got it up on the jacks. They set their wheels in place. They got their rope pulled. It was very coordinated. And I can just remember us being iron workers. Everybody says big dumb iron workers, just throwing big steel around and flying up pieces on the crane, everything like that. I just remember seeing them being so coordinated. And then at the end of the wire pool, they just kept going. And I'm like, well, they seem like they got enough. And my uncle was like, yeah, well, they're going to get some scrap wire out of this too. So they kept pulling, man, extra 10, 12 feet for the apprentice, and they took care of their people. So I just saw that coordinated effort of like getting set up for it and, working as a team to get that wire pull. And I thought, like, they're really thinking this through. It's more of a thought process as opposed to just grunt work all the time. So that was kind of really what attracted me. And then, like I said, when I ran into my buddy down the road and I had already had that experience with the electricians, it made it that much easier. So
That's awesome. And it's always, for me, it's always funny listening to, especially with plumbers and then obviously iron workers, just all the different trades, all the different things they like to say about electricians. And it's a two-way street. Electricians like to say certain things about other trades, but I think it's always in good nature fun at the end of the day. But it is always, it's very interesting. But I would say that's more of a unique perspective that than I was expecting to hear. So
definitely.
that's pretty cool.
Definitely.
You went through the apprenticeship with perfect attendance, which is awesome. You got named the outstanding apprentice of your class and were teaching within months, which to me that's a pretty cool feat. What drove that, and did you already know then that you wanted to be in leadership?
So I think that's a twofold question. I think what drove the perfect attendance was I had a young family at home looking up to me. I completed high school. I got into the Ironworkers apprenticeship, and I never completed that. So never went to college. So I never really had anything completed in my life besides high school, which is pretty common. But I didn't go into a secondary education, and I did not complete the Ironworkers apprenticeship. So my push was to finish something, so my kids and my wife could see me finish something, and the rest of my family as well. But just to complete something and get a certificate saying, like, hey, you are now a journeyman wireman. In school, I was the class rep. My classmates used to always joke and say, like, you'll be a business agent, you'll be at the hall soon, whatever. I would always just laugh about it. I never really had ambitions to be working for the local or being in an elected position. I just wanted to be involved. I wanted to be at the union meetings. I wanted to volunteer. I wanted to help. I wanted to let people know what this opportunity was given that I was getting and let them know about it so I could pass it along. But in the beginning, I never had ambitions to work full time for the union hall or for the local. But I just wanted to be involved, and I wanted to be, if there was something that needed to be done. We had a volunteer organizing committee when I was in my first and second year apprenticeship. I got involved in our local Renew early on. I've aged out of that now, but still try to attend their events when I can. But was super involved in a lot of opportunities I could. When anything was coming up with legislation, whether it be at City Hall or in Annapolis, I would try to, attend like rallies and labor night, stuff like that. So I really just wanted to be involved. I did not necessarily want to work here full time. But very quickly after my apprenticeship, a year after, I was coming out of COVID, or we're still in COVID, and I remember we were on a call, because you said I went into teaching, and I was teaching in that March of 2020, COVID kind of shut down school, so we went virtual. And we didn't need as many in-school teachers, so I kind of stepped away for the end of that school year, and then come like the next August, we were having like a school year Zoom call just like this, and I got off the Zoom call with the apprenticeship, and the business manager called. And I'm like, well, this has to do with the apprenticeship thing. And he offered me a job on staff as an organizer. Very, very tough decision to make. I was very happy where I was at with the contractor I was with, and I was in a good position, with a service van, and it had really good perks, But I thought that if I didn't accept this opportunity now, is it ever going to present itself again? So went home, talked with the wife, had to give up the teaching, which I really thoroughly enjoyed because I got to talk to the young apprentices, and I was still young out of my time too, and I was a little bit older, so a little bit more, I could give them some more life lessons. So that was tough to give up the teaching, but I jumped in, head first. I think I started, he said, like, I needed to start on a certain day, August the 24th. I remember was the date, 2020, so I've been on staff since August the 24th of 2020.
That's awesome.
But yeah, that's kind of really, that whole apprenticeship to business agent. I never thought that it would get to this point. So
that's pretty cool.
Here we are. So,
and a lot of people, at least a lot of the members I've talked to, we all know we have representation, but I also think it's important to remember, even as a rank and file member, that we represent ourselves, we represent our local, but that all involves us getting involved in some manner. I mean, ideally, it's in your local hall, but even if you can, there's other ways outside of just being in your local hall that you can do those things, whether it's talking about political things that might disrupt work for you or that might improve work for you. So there's a lot of different ways, and I think that would help a lot of apprentices or younger level individuals in the unions if they just became more involved. And it sounds like you did that, and it's obviously paid off for you pretty well to this point. So that's awesome.
Yeah, pretty happy where I'm at. And I mean, I try to tell everybody to get involved, and everybody always asks, well, how do I get involved? First off, show up to the union meetings, find out what's going on in your local union, volunteer at any kind of picnics or Christmas parties, anything that your local has. We have a Christmas party every year for the children. My kids are to the point now where that they want to volunteer and they want to help. So it's pretty cool now to see it. You know, they used to attend and see Santa and get the gift and all, but now they're actually setting up the drinks and giving out the food and stuff like that. So it's more than just a job, and that's what I try to portray to people when we're out here talking to people.
Yeah. And speaking of being involved, it sounds like you've been pretty involved since you've taken your position. You've signed 15 new signatory employers as an organizer. Local 24 is still actively going after non-union electricians, like just about any local in America right now. What's the hardest objection you hear from workers who haven't signed over to the union side?
So I think when you're talking to the actual electricians about joining the local, there's been a lot of misconception about the IBEW, Local 24 in general. A little history of Local 24. We haven't always been Local 24. We've only been Local 24 since 1961. Prior to that, we were Local 28. It's a whole nother story for a whole nother podcast. I don't really want to get into that right now. But there is some history here that some people still remember, where they heard from their grandparents or their aunts and uncles and so forth. So sometimes we run into that. The biggest misconception is sometimes always, oh, you pay working dues or you pay membership dues. You pay to go to work. I used to sit down with the guys and say, like, well, you pay non-union dues. And they're like, explain it to me. And I'm like, all right, well, if our package is $70 an hour and yours is $35 an hour, the difference is the non-union dues. So that's what you're paying.
Yeah.
And the other big misconception is that you're always laid off. It's funny because we've seen a lot of non-union around here that are being laid off recently, and they don't think that they can get laid off too. But I always tell them, if you're confident in your ability, you show up to work every day, you're a good electrician, you will stay employed. So
I
think that's some of the biggest. And then even sometimes talking to the contractors, like I said, we've been fairly successful, like on top-down organizing here. And I think it's been our ability to recruit manpower is what has been the attractive piece. But even talking to the contractors, they think that we're going to like run their business, and we have no interference with their day-to-day operations on how they manage their business. Now, of course, the CBA comes into place, and the referral procedure, et cetera. But as far as like us telling them what to bid and who to, we're not involved in any of that. We ask them to look at things for us that we want to do. We want to make sure we're good on, but we don't necessarily interact with their day-to-day operations. And I think sometimes the contractors feel like that's what we're going to do, and that's why they get a little, nervous talking to us. So
I kind of want to touch on a few different things. One, about the working dues aspect. I feel like a lot of people, I mean, obviously there's a lot of misinformation out there, and you hear it from Joe, who heard it from Tom, that you're going to pay your whole paycheck in working dues, which from all the information I've saw online, I mean, you could pay anywhere from 2.5% to 6% maybe max on your working dues. But kind of like you said, we have typically higher rates, and then you take our whole total package, compare it to a non-union electrician. I came from the non-union side. I was making $12 an hour when I very first started out non-union. When I first got into the union, I was only making, with my benefits, maybe like $24 an hour, which isn't an astronomical difference, but there's still that difference, and that's right off the rip. That gave me health insurance, an annuity, I was paying into a pension plan. There's a lot of misinformation out there, and that's why I enjoy social media. I like to get correct information out there, and that's why I like to have these conversations. And then also building off of that, you mentioned the contractors. Not a lot, but there are contractors that probably have that in the back of their mind while they're going to basically make me operate my business in some capacity. And I think you nailed it on the head. They're free to do whatever they want. There is an agreement in place that they have to follow, but outside of that, it's fair game. It's a business at the end of the day. So
yeah, and we always tell them, hey, we're not going to spend your money. We're not going to tell you how to spend your money. We're going to ask you to look at certain projects that we may have worked on legislatively to make sure that there's prevailing wage or there's workers standards in place on that project. Not necessarily a PLA, but maybe a community benefits agreement or something like that. Or a high-profile project in the area that, hey, we want the IBEW on this. Can you guys take a look at this? And if it doesn't if it doesn't pencil, then we're not gonna pressure them to do it. So, but
speaking of prevailing wage, but I believe you just mentioned project labor agreement in January of 2026, so this year, covering major infrastructure work in Baltimore. This was your guys' first PLA, is that correct? The one in January of 2026?
As far as I know, this is the first PLA with the city.
Okay.
And I'll be honest with you, Noah, we here at Local 24 can't take a ton of credit for this. I got to give a ton of credit to the Baltimore DC building trades, Greg Ackerman and Ray Baker and Nick Cummins. Those guys did a phenomenal job with this project labor agreement. But we were super excited about it, though, for sure.
And that PLA is for the Back River Waste Treatment Plant. I guess how big of a win is that for, I guess your Local 24 or the city as a whole? And do you actually get a city how do you finally get a city to cross that line? Because in my opinion, I feel like there's a lot of red tape that goes around PLAs to a lot of different people.
Yeah, absolutely. So, like I said, the Baltimore City PLA, give a lot of credit to the building trades, the Baltimore DC building trades for that. Actively involved in politics. Something that we weren't heavily involved in at the local level was the politicians, but getting in these conversations with the mayor, city council members, and let them know hey, we raised the standard for all workers, not just union members, when we had these PLAs in place. So getting them to truly understand what we're trying to do. There's a lot of anti-PLA, non-union ABCs, big in Baltimore. I was just testified on a PLA bill in Anne Arundel County, which is where I'm a resident of, just south of Baltimore, and there was probably 35 people opposed to it, and it was all the business owners. None of their employees that would have benefited from this project labor agreement. It was all the business owners who don't want to pay the prevailing wage, and follow standards and give them a good wage and benefits. So getting the city to finally get on board is good. It's a start in the right direction. I think as long as things go well, we do well, we can talk about some bigger projects and kind of keep that moving. Just gotta deliver on time safely and hold ourselves to a higher standard on projects like this, because it's going to be a high profile project now, because everybody's going to be looking now that there's a PLA. So definitely got to make sure we perform.
And speaking of that, with bigger projects or bigger scale projects, with anything involving more money ultimately, Local 24 represents over 3,000 members from Frederick to Ocean City. Where do you see the biggest room to grow, and what are the real obstacles standing in the way? I guess specific. I guess I kind of wanted to be a two-sided story, or not story, but question, sure, specific to Local 24, and then maybe for the IBEW as a whole.
So I think I'll speak specifically on Local 24. We've experienced significant growth. Like I said, I started in August of 2020. We were probably hovering around 1,900 members at that time. Fast forward 5 years, 3,200 active members. The last awesome. 6 or 7 months, we've been swearing in 8,200 new members. It's been an interesting time to be the president and swearing in that many new people at the union meeting. But it's been a good time. So I think, the market share numbers are what they are here. I think we're roughly 18 to 22%, just depends on who you look at in our jurisdiction. So our biggest growth is definitely the non-union. And the way we see it is, they send one person over, and then he says, hey, this is what they say it is, and then more and more come over from the same company. So it's definitely areas that we need to expand is just keep talking to the non-union and you know, disbanding some of those myths that we talked about earlier, just to make sure that they know that, like, this is the real deal, you know, and just make sure that they have the right information, because misinformation, like you said, that's what turns them away. So
That's, like I said, that's why I have my platform. There's multiple reasons, but one of them's for putting out the correct information. You wouldn't believe the amount of not only comments, but emails and then just direct messages that are just so over the top incorrect. It's kind of funny but sad all in one, so it's very interesting. But I'm a firm believer in seeing is believing, so whether it's an image I put out or just me talking, everything I put out can be factually backed in some capacity. So that in itself I'm proud of. But yeah, that's awesome though that you guys have been able to grow. I mean, that's 1,300 new members in a pretty short amount of time. So
I'll tell you what, a lot of the growth has come through social media. In 2020, like I said, when I came on staff, we continued to get younger on staff. So like as the staff got younger, the social media presence kind of grew and grew and grew. Yeah. And we couldn't go on the job sites because of COVID, so we had to find a way to reach people. So it was through where they were. They were in their phones on Facebook and Instagram and now TikTok. Anywhere that we could drive ads to them. We started geofencing. We were on their ESPN apps. We were on anywhere's on their phone. So we started like really hammering in this logo. And I mean, you see it on my shirt. This is what we've been pushing. We got billboards running all around the area now, and we're all over the radio stations. So not only social media, but just brand awareness of who we are. So everybody sees us, and the conversation is that much easier when they've heard about us, they've seen us, you know, on social media. We've really, really upped our social media game.
That's awesome.
A lot of people have noticed, and you know, it's been good stuff. So.
I wish out of all the interviews or episodes I've done to this point, I wish I could cut out probably the last 2 minutes that you were just talking, just run that daily online. I think it would do a lot of good, but that's a topic for a new day. Like we previously said, and right now you're the president of IBEW 24. If you could get the International to do one thing differently to better support locals like yours, what would it be?
So I think the International does a lot of good things, and you know, a lot of people have some negative things to say about the International and what they do. Sometimes I don't like the one size fits all approach. Yeah. What doesn't work on the West Coast isn't going to work on the East Coast. What doesn't work in Southeast Ohio probably doesn't work in Florida. So sometimes that one size fits all approach I don't necessarily like. And we've been great. We've had great reps, international reps from the 4th District. Austin Keeser's doing a great job as the IVP right now. And, you know, we've got a lot of support from them, and they kind of understand the unique situation that we're in. And they've also brought some good ideas to us also about, you know, some organizing things for data centers and stuff like that. So, you know, with the data center boom that we're having, getting, you know, in front of the people that we have, that's other locals are experiencing the same thing we are. You probably are in your area as well, with this big influx of work that, like, we're not used to. So they've seen it. They're helping with that. So, like I said, I just think sometimes the one-size-fits-all approach isn't always the best, you know, option.
I would fully agree with that. And you kind of, not specific to this topic, but you mentioned younger leadership. I think over the next, especially 5 years, in my personal opinion, I think that will be one of the biggest or most critical aspects of, I guess, not only the IBEW but all union labor. I think more younger leadership needs to be involved in some capacity. I'll leave it at that, but I think younger leadership is needed, and yeah, I fully agree with what you just said, though. And kind of put the icing on the cake.
I was going to say real quick, our Renew and our EWMC and Women's Committee, our affinity groups are really thriving here. So a lot of younger folks are getting involved and doing a lot of good things too. So
that's what we need. Everyone's an organizer. You don't have to be labeled an organizer to be an organizer. Every last person in every union trade is an organizer. I'm a firm believer in that. I forget who I heard that from. It was one of the past episodes. The individual said that, and I was like, I'm thinking to myself, yeah, you're right. So it's very important, and that's awesome that they're thriving. It's awesome that there's young membership being involved. That's important for anything.
Absolutely.
And now, not at the end of your career, but you're a master electrician, which is awesome. A union president, that's awesome. A husband and father, which I'm sure you're most proud of. When you talk to a young person in Baltimore about the trades, what's the honest version, or what's the, I guess, honest version of the conversation you give to them? Like, what's the nail in the coffin to, I guess, recruit them in?
You know, it's funny. I'll go back to this conversation when I was in high school. I knew I didn't want to go to college. Just wasn't for me. And my mom took me around to some like trade schools. And the guy says to me at this one trade school, which thank goodness I didn't spend my parents' money for the trade school that would have not gotten me an apprenticeship certificate, but said to me, you know, what do you want out of your career? And, you know, 17, 18-year-old, I said, a retirement. And the guy was like blown away by it because he'll never hear that from that age. And that's been my goal, is to, you know, a nice retirement with benefits. So at the end of the day, I tell them young folks, like, this is what we're working towards, is retirement and a nice pension, annuity, generational wealth that we're creating. Young folks in Baltimore City that maybe that they don't have a great upbringing, they're creating generational wealth for their entire family from the IBEW, this apprenticeship. And then also, like, it's just not a one-track thing. You don't go through apprenticeship and just be a journeyman electrician, that's it. You can, and that's perfectly fine. But you can be a foreman, you can be a general foreman, you can be a superintendent, you can be a business agent, you can be the business manager, you can be the president, you can be business owner, you can work for NICA, you can work for the international. Opens up so many opportunities that it's not just an electrician. And I don't say that lightly, that just being an electrician is anything wrong with that. And I would strap the tools back on tomorrow if I need to. And be happy doing that.
Yeah.
But there's so many opportunities that this apprenticeship has opened to me and to a lot of people that I just don't think they understand. And sometimes people take it for granted when they get accepted into an apprenticeship or our apprenticeship in general. They don't realize what is at the end. They know they got to go to school, and it's long days, and go to work full time and sometimes overtime, and then go into class until 8 o'clock at night and get up and do it all over again the next day. But at the end of the day, when you finish that apprenticeship, they give you that yellow ticket that nobody can take away. As long as you continue paying them dues, you got that journeyman ticket, and nobody can take that from you. So I try to, there's a lot of things I try to, you know, hammer home to them, but I think the one is the retirement for sure.
And that's something a lot of young people, honestly, they don't forget about it. A lot of them just aren't aware of it. And when you're 18, 19, 20 years old, you're not really thinking when you're 65 years old, which I completely get. But the retirement's a very large aspect of it. The health insurance along the way is a very big aspect of it. I mean, people are, every day you're getting a little older, you're not getting any younger. There's a lot of different aspects to that. But yeah, all those things are at least what kept me in, especially in the times while going through my apprenticeship where I was like, I don't think this is for me. I'm very glad I stuck it out and saw it all through. But those two things alone were what kept me in quite a few times early on in my apprenticeship. So yeah, that's awesome though. And yeah, that's
absolutely, yeah, it's all good stuff. I try to tell everybody I can about it. You know, my wife rides around in her vehicle with a stack of business cards, and she's constantly sending me pictures of non-union vans and tell me where they're at. So I even got my wife as an organizer now. So
that's awesome.